When I discovered the homeowner association president was slowly contaminating my mom's water supply, I didn't just get mad. I got even by buying their water rights and cutting them off completely. What would you do if someone was secretly making your family ill just to force you out of your house? I was watering mom's beloved roses when Karen Thompson's shiny black SUV pulled into our driveway, scattering gravel. My stomach instantly tightened. Every time the homeowner association president visited, trouble followed. "Alex," Karen called through her barely rolled down window, "those garden gnomes simply must go. They break Section 8, Paragraph 12 of our community rules." I set down my watering can. "They've been here for 7 years, Karen, since Dad passed." Karen's smile didn't reach her expression. "Rules are rules. I've been tolerant, but the board is demanding. Remove them by Friday or it's a $200 penalty per gnome." As her SUV backed, I counted the garden gnomes, all 8 of them, each representing a cherished memory with Dad. That would be $1,600 in charges if I ignored her money we didn't have. With Mom's medical bills stacking up, Mom appeared at the screen door, leaning against the frame for balance. Was that Karen again? "Just homeowner association concerns," I lied, not wanting to worry. Her mom had been having dizzy episodes lately. The doctors couldn't figure out why. By that night, I carefully wrapped each gnome in newspaper and stored them in the shed. Dad had bought one every year on Mom's birthday. Now, they sat in darkness like pieces of our joy being slowly chipped away. Friday came, and I spotted Karen walking the streets with her clipboard, checking for infractions. She paused at our garden, making a show of nodding approval before writing something down. Anyway, by Monday, we received another letter. Our mailbox was the wrong shade of blue. We needed to repaint it. The approved midnight azure from the Homeowner Association color guide. "It's just a mailbox," I told Mom as I repainted it. "Not worth arguing over." But the next week, it was our birdhouse, then our chimes, then the height of our shrubs. Each time Karen visited, Mom seemed worse afterward, more exhausted, more disoriented. I started to wonder if the stress was making her condition decline. One evening, as I was taking out garbage, I noticed Doug Thompson, Karen's husband, standing near our water valve at the edge of our property. When he saw me, he quickly turned away, pretending to check his phone. "Everything okay?" I called out. "Just walking the dog," he replied, though I didn't see any dog with him. I mentioned it to our neighbor, Elaine Rodriguez, who lived across the road. "The Thompsons don't even have a dog," she muttered, leaning over her fence. "And between you and me, Karen's been targeting anyone who opposed her at the last homeowner association election. Your mom was the only one who spoke up about Karen's plan to double our fees." That night, Mom couldn't keep dinner down. Her skin looked pale in the bathroom light as she curled over the toilet. "I think we should go to the clinic," I said, helping her to the car. The emergency room doctor ran tests but found nothing definite. "Could be a virus," he suggested, "or possibly something in the air." "Any changes at home recently?" On the drive back, Mom slept in the passenger seat. I took the long way, passing the Thompson house. Their lights were on, and I could see Karen and Doug in their kitchen window laughing. Over drinks the next morning, Mom couldn't get out of bed. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't hold her cup. I called Dr. Patel, who agreed to fit her in. While waiting for our appointment, I walked our property line looking for anything strange near the water meter where I'd seen Doug. The ground looked disturbed. Kneeling down, I noticed small droplets of blue liquid on some nearby stones. My phone rang. It was the hospital. Mom had collapsed in Dr. Patel's clinic. "We're running toxicology tests," the nurse explained. "The doctor suspects some type of poisoning." Poisoning? My mind flashed to Doug by our water meter. The blue drops. The timing of Mom's symptoms getting worse after Karen's visits. I rushed to the hardware store and bought a security camera. That night, I installed it in our oak tree, pointing directly at the water source. If Doug came back, I'd have evidence. Mom stayed in the hospital 3 days. Her tests showed elevated levels of unusual chemicals, but nothing the doctors could immediately determine. "Whatever it is, it's causing liver and kidney damage," Dr. Patel explained. Has she been exposed to any toxins, pesticides, new cleaning products? When we got home, a notice was taped to our door. The homeowner association was charging us for unauthorized landscaping because I hadn't mowed the yard while taking care of mom in the hospital. As I crumpled the notice, my security camera alert flashed. Someone was at our water meter right now. I raced outside just in time to see Doug Thompson walking away. Karen waited in their SUV at the curb, engine running. "What are you doing to our supply?" I shouted. Karen rolled down her window. "Alex, you're clearly under pressure. Perhaps your mother's illness is affecting your thinking." They drove off before I could react. My hands shook as I checked the security footage. There it was. Doug pouring something from a small container into our water line. Karen keeping watch. Both of them grinning. I grabbed a water sample from our kitchen tap and the recording from my camera. These people were poisoning my mother, and I was going to make them pay. The water testing lab looked ordinary from the outside. Just another shop in a strip mall. But the specialist, Dave, took my sample seriously when I explained my suspicions. "It'll take 48 hours for complete results," he warned. "But I can run a quick scan for common toxins." Today, while waiting, I visited mom in the clinic. Her skin was ashen against the white bedding. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes like shadows. "The neighbors keep asking about you," I told her, trying to sound cheerful. "Elaine brought food. Even Mr. Jenkins from 2 doors down sent flowers." Mom tried to smile. "And Karen? Has she sent another violation letter while I've been away?" I squeezed her palm. "Don't worry about Karen right now." My phone vibrated with a message from Dave. "Call me immediately." I stepped into the hallway, heart racing. "What did you find?" "Ethylene glycol," Dave said grimly. "Antifreeze. Low concentration, but definitely detected. I've never seen it in residential water before." "You should call the authorities immediately." I drove straight to the station with my water sample and footage. Officer Martinez took my report but looked doubtful. "The video shows someone at your water supply, but we can't clearly see what substance is being poured," she explained. "And trace amounts of chemicals can get into water pipes many ways." "My mother is in the hospital with organ failure," I protested. "The timing matches perfectly with when the Thompsons were at our meter." "We'll investigate," she promised. But without clear proof, I left feeling defeated. Back home, another homeowner association notice awaited. Unauthorized security equipment must be removed within 24 hours. They knew about my camera, which meant they'd been watching our house the next day. Installed 3 more devices, hidden ones this time. If the Thompsons returned, I'd capture them from multiple angles. At the hospital, Dr. Patel confirmed the findings from my water test. "Ethylene glycol poisoning matches your mother's condition. We've adjusted her treatment accordingly, but the damage to her organs may be permanent." Permanent. The word echoed in my head as I drove home, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned pale. A voice message waited on my phone. "Malcolm Reed, the homeowner association treasurer. Alex, we need to discuss these claims you're making. The board takes homeowner issues very seriously, but accusing fellow residents of crimes without proof has consequences." I deleted the message and called my college friend Jamie, now an environmental lawyer. "They're poisoning her slowly," I explained. "Just enough to make her weak, not enough to kill her fast. They want us gone because mom opposed their fee hikes." "This is serious, Alex." Jamie said. "If the police won't help, we need to get smart. Tell me everything about Pinecrest Gardens." Utilities. For the next 3 hours, we dug into property records, utility contracts, and the homeowner association guidelines. Jamie found something interesting. Unlike most communities where water was provided by the city, Pinecrest Gardens water came from private wells managed by a company called Clearwater LLC. "Look at this," Jamie said, sending me a document Clearwater filed for Chapter 11 last month. "They're restructuring debts and likely selling assets." "Why does that matter?" I asked. "Because whoever owns the water rights controls the supply," Jamie explained. "The homeowner association has a long-term contract with Clearwater, but if someone else bought the business, a plan began forming in my thoughts. How much would it cost to buy a failing water company? More than most people have lying around, Jamie admitted. But less than you might expect in bankruptcy cases. I thought about Mom's deteriorating condition, the hospital expenses, the smug look on Karen's face. I've got savings and my $401,000, and the house has value. Alex, think carefully. This is a big decision. The next morning, as I was leaving to visit Mom, Karen's SUV blocked my path. She rolled down her window, smiling like we were old friends. Alex, the board is concerned about your mother. If her health makes maintaining property standards challenging, perhaps it's time to consider assisted care. I know a lovely facility in the next town. Hands clenched into fists. My mother isn't going anywhere. Well, Karen, the neighborhood has certain standards. We've been patient, but the infractions are piling up. The fines now total over $3,000. I never received notices for most of these supposed offenses. Karen waved a manicured hand. They were properly delivered according to homeowner association rules. If you can't pay, we'll have to place a lien on your property. That's when I knew for certain this wasn't random harassment. They were systematically trying to force us out. I'll handle the fines, I said calmly. And Karen, be careful about drinking the water around here. I hear it's not clean. Her smile weakened for just a second. Before she drove off at the hospital, Mom had visitors, Elaine and 3 other neighbors who had also clashed with Karen in the past. We don't believe the homeowner association rumors about you and your mom, Elaine said. Karen's been getting worse. Since she became leader, more power obsessed. Has anyone else gotten sick? I asked carefully. They exchanged looks. Not sick, exactly, said Mr. Jenkins. But my dog died suddenly last month after Karen complained about his barking. The vet couldn't explain it. I showed them the water test reports, but not the video. I didn't want to put them at risk. We're with you, Elaine promised. Just tell us how we can help. That evening, I called Jamie's contact at a bank lawyer's office. After explaining what I wanted to do, emptied my savings account and applied for a home equity loan the next day. Dear Patel pulled me aside during my visit with Mom. Her kidneys are operating at 40% capacity. She's going to need dialysis, possibly a transplant eventually. I sat in the hospital parking lot, staring at nothing, rage boiling inside me. My phone rang. Jamie, the initial proposal has been submitted, she said. Now we wait. 2 days later, Malcolm Reed left another voicemail. Alex, we've heard disturbing claims about your intentions regarding Clearwater LLC. The board would like to meet with you immediately to discuss water distribution concerns. They were nervous. Good. I deleted the message and checked my hidden cameras. No sign of the Thompsons near our water meter, but Doug's car had driven by our house 6 times yesterday. The bank approved my request. Jamie's contact called with news our offer for Clearwater LLC had been accepted. In 1 week, I would own the business that controlled the homeowner association's water supply. That night, as I sat by Mom's hospital bed watching her breathe, I made a vow. Karen Thompson thought she could poison my mother and get away with it. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Blood pounded in my ears as I stared at the lab reports in my hands. My hands shook with fury. The water sample from our house contained ethylene glycol antifreeze. Not enough to kill Mom quickly, but just enough to make her slowly weaker each day. I slammed my fist on the table, shaking my coffee cup. Who does this to an innocent woman in her 60s? I called Detective Rivera immediately. I have proof. The lab found antifreeze in our water, and I have video of Doug Thompson messing with our water supply. The detective sighed. I understand you're angry, but the video doesn't clearly show what substance he's adding, if anything. And finding toxins in your water doesn't prove who put them there. Are you serious? They're poisoning my mother. My voice broke. I need direct evidence linking the Thompsons to the crime. Keep the video safe, and we'll continue investigating. That afternoon, a notice appeared on our door. Bright red paper with bold letters. Violation. Unauthorized surveillance devices must be removed within 48 hours or face a $500 penalty. I laughed coldly. Of course, Karen would try to get rid of the cameras that caught her husband. I took photos of the notice, and called mom's doctor to inform him of the lab findings. "We'll adjust her medication now that we know what we're dealing with," he said. "But Alex, she needs to stop being exposed immediately." Trying everything, I whispered, watching mom rest in her hospital bed, tubes running from her arms. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced our living room until 3 o'clock. I'm searching online for anything about homeowner association water systems. A forgotten memory emerged. Dad once mentioned something about our neighborhood's unusual water setup. I dug through his old files in the basement until sunrise, sneezing from the dust. In a folder labeled Home Purchase, I found it. Records showing Pinecrest Gardens water didn't come directly from the city, but through a private company called Clearwater LLC. Curious, I researched Clearwater LLC all day instead of going to work. Their website looked outdated. Last updated in 2018, public documents showed they owned water rights to 3 communities, including ours. More importantly, recent news article mentioned they were facing financial trouble after their founder died. My college roommate Jason now worked as a water rights lawyer in Colorado. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I dialed his number anyway. "Jason, it's Alex. I have a strange legal question." After explaining everything, Jason went silent for so long, I thought we disconnected. "So you're saying this company that controls your homeowner association's water is going bankrupt?" He finally asked. "That's what it seems like, and you want to know if you could purchase it?" My heart raced at hearing my half-formed idea spoken aloud. Could I? Technically, yes. Water rights are assets that can be bought and sold. But, Alex, what exactly are you thinking? I glanced at mom's empty seat where she should be doing her puzzles. "Justice. This could cost everything you have," Jason cautioned. "What's money compared to mom's health?" I replied, my mind already spinning with possibilities. That evening, I visited mom in the hospital. Her skin looked pale under the harsh lights. "Any news on what's making me ill?" she asked weakly. I squeezed her hand, debating how much to tell her. Before I could respond, Karen Thompson walked in carrying a bouquet of lies. "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here," she said with fake surprise. "I've been so concerned about your mother." Our eyes locked. Did she know that I suspected? Was this visit a way to see how much damage she'd done? "How thoughtful of you," I said coldly. "Mom needs rest now. You should leave." Karen placed the flowers down and touched mom's foot through the blanket. "We're all praying for you, Margaret. The neighborhood just isn't the same without your smile." After she left, mom looked confused. That was odd. She's never brought me flowers before. I gripped the bed rail so hard. My knuckles turned white. "Mom, I need to ask you something important. Do you trust me with my life?" She answered without hesitation. "I might need to do something extreme to make you safe. It might make some people angry." She smiled weakly. "Your father always said sometimes you need to fight fire with fire." Her eyes drifted closed from the medication. As I left the hospital, my phone buzzed with an email from Jason with details for Clearwater LLC's bankruptcy attorney. The subject line read, "Are you sure about this?" I wasn't sure about anything except that Karen and her allies deserved what was coming. How far would they go to protect their neighborhood reputation? "You want to buy Clearwater LLC?" The bankruptcy attorney stared at me like I had 2 faces. "The company that owns 3 failing water systems, including Pinecrest Gardens." I nodded firmly, heart pounding but voice calm. "That's exactly what I want." "But why?" "The infrastructure needs repairs. They're behind on their approvals. And I have my reasons." I cut him off. "How much?" He named a figure that made my mouth go dry. "It would take every penny of my savings, my $401,000 with the fees, and still need a loan." But mom's weak face flashed in my thoughts, and I knew I had no option. "I'll need 2 weeks to get the funds together," I said, walking to my car. Doubt flooded me. Was I insane? Could I really pull this off? My phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Mom's kidney function was getting worse. The doubts vanished instantly. The next morning, I applied for a home equity loan and withdrew my retirement funds. The bank manager raised his eyebrows but asked no questions. I called work and requested unpaid leave for family emergency. While waiting for the loan approval, I visited the county records office and pulled every document related to Clearwater LLC. The clerk, a silver-haired woman named Doris, helped me navigate the system. Interesting company, she noted. They've held those water rights since 1983. Used to be well run until old Mr. Jenkins passed. Do you know if they have any special powers over the neighborhoods they control? I asked. Doris grinned. Honey, the one who manages the water controls everything. That's been true since the beginning of time. The loan was approved quickly. I signed a pile of paperwork, trying not to think about the enormous debt I was taking on. Jason called to check my mindset. You're really doing this? He asked. You understand you'll be responsible for providing water to hundreds of houses? I only care about one home. Ours, I replied. But don't worry, I'm not planning to leave anyone without water forever? That doesn't sound comforting, Jason muttered. 3 weeks of sleepless nights and endless forms later, I sat in a cold conference room signing the final agreements. The bankruptcy attorney still looked puzzled, but pleased to close the troubled case. Congratulations, he said, sliding a folder toward me. You now own Clearwater LLC, including all assets, permits, and responsibilities. The staff login sheet for the digital records is inside. Driving home with the documents beside me felt unreal. I now controlled the water supply to the very people who had harmed my mother. The power of it made me dizzy. I stopped by the hospital first. Mom was resting, her face thin and tired. Dr. Patel met me in the hallway, his expression serious. We've removed the toxins from her system, but there's been damage to her organs. She might recover partially with time, but some effects could be lasting. Rage boiled inside me permanent. She was perfectly healthy before this. I'm sorry, he said softly. The good news is she's strong enough to come home next week. You'll need to watch her closely, though. A nurse approached with fresh linens. Such a sweet woman, she commented. And that neighbor of yours comes by every day with flowers. Karen, is it? Says your mom is like family to her. A lump rose in my throat. Karen was coming here daily, playing the caring neighbor while her husband's poison did its work. I thanked the nurse and sat with Mom until visiting hours ended. On my way out, I passed the gift shop and spotted Karen choosing another bouquet. I ducked behind a shelf, watching as she purchased lilies and asked the clerk for a card. Through the gift shop glass, I could see her writing on the tiny card, her mouth curved in what might look like concern to others. But I noticed the satisfaction underneath. At home, I opened the Clearwater LLC documents and found the login information for their billing and water control system. The outdated platform took forever to load, but eventually I had access to every meter in Pinecrest Gardens, including usage rates, billing, and shut-off functions. My phone rang just after midnight. A number I didn't know. Hello, Alex. This is Malcolm Reed from the Homeowner Association Board. His voice sounded strained. We've become aware that you've purchased Clearwater LLC. My heart raced. How did they find out so quickly? News travels fast, I said evenly. The board would like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss this unexpected situation. I'm not interested in meeting, I replied. Be sensible. Malcolm's voice hardened. We all live here. This affects everyone in Pinecrest Gardens. So does my mother, I said. Anger building. And she might not live here much longer thanks to your friends. I don't know what you're suggesting, but tell Karen and the board they'll receive official notice tomorrow. I ended the call before he could reply. I stayed up all night learning the water system controls. By dawn, had written an official letter to the Homeowner Association. Board effective immediately. Water rates would increase by 400% for all Pinecrest Gardens residents. As the sun rose, I walked to our community mailbox and sent identical letters to each board member. Then I drove to the small Clearwater LLC office. I now owned and changed the locks. Inside, dusty cabinets contained decades of records. In a folder labeled Pinecrest Gardens, I found something interesting. A contract clause allowing for emergency price adjustments without prior consent. My phone began ringing constantly. First Malcolm again, then other board members. I let them all go to voicemail only when Karen's name flashed on my screen. Did I answer? What do you think you're doing? She hissed. Managing my business, I replied calmly. This is unlawful. You can't increase our water charges overnight. Actually, I can. Section 7, paragraph 3 of the original agreement. You might want to read it. There was silence then. What do you want? I smiled for the first time in weeks. Let's talk about what you've been adding to my mother's water. Karen banged on my door at 7 o'clock a.m., her face red with fury. You can't do this. It's blackmail, she screamed, waving the bill in my face. I leaned against the door frame, surprisingly composed. Is it kind of like slowly poisoning an elderly woman? Isn't you have no evidence? She hissed, looking nervously at my camera. I don't need evidence anymore. I have something better. I have control. The phone wouldn't stop ringing all day. Malcolm, the treasurer, called 6 times. Board members I'd never even spoken to suddenly wanted to talk. I let most go to voicemail, but finally picked up when Malcolm called from a different number. This is unacceptable, he sputtered. People can't afford these rates. I have conditions, I said simply. First, a public admission of what Karen and Doug did to my mother. Second, they leave Pinecrest Gardens permanently. Third, you create a fund for mom's treatment. They're over $200,000 now. That's ridiculous. We can't admit to something with no proof. Then I guess I'll shut off water service to the entire community, except for my house tomorrow. I checked with 3 lawyers. It's completely legal. He hung up 20 minutes later. Karen texted everyone about an emergency homeowner association meeting that night at the hall. The message called me a neighborhood criminal who was holding our water hostage. I didn't plan to go, but my neighbor Ted knocked on my door at 6:30 p.m. You should attend, he said quietly. Karen's telling everyone you're making up lies about her poisoning your mom because you're angry about gnome violations. The community center buzzed with angry voices. When I walked in, the room went silent. Karen stood at the front, pointer in hand, showing a slide that read "Water Terrorist" with my picture below it. Here he is now, she announced, dramatically, the man who thinks he can destroy us all over some silly yard decoration rules. I walked straight to the front. May I asked, holding out my hand for the microphone. Karen clutched it tighter, but Malcolm nervously nodded at her to hand it over. I bought Clearwater LLC for one reason, I said, my voice shaking slightly. My mother has been in the hospital for weeks. 3 separate laboratories found antifreeze in our water system. I have video of Doug Thompson tampering with our water line while Karen kept watch. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Karen lunged for the microphone. Nonsense. All lies. He has no proof. He's just angry because we enforce the rules everyone else follows. Why would I spend my savings to buy a water company over garden gnomes? I asked the crowd. Think about it. Doug stood up. This is slander. We'll sue you. An older woman in the back raised her hand. My dog got ill last month after Karen complained about my holiday decorations. The vet found something unusual in his blood, but couldn't identify it. Other neighbors stood. My kids had stomach problems for weeks after we argued about fence height. We changed to bottled water and they got better. Karen's face went white. This is absurd. You're all being tricked. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, I slipped out. When I got home, I found my mailbox smashed and liar spray painted on my garage door. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. In my inbox was a message with no text, just a video attachment. It showed Karen and Doug arguing in their garage. They can't prove anything, Doug was saying, pouring liquid from a container labeled antifreeze into a smaller bottle. Just a few drops in the right places and problem neighbors disappear. I forwarded the email to everyone in the homeowner association directory. By noon, police cars lined our street. As they led Karen and Doug away in handcuffs, I stood watching from my window, wondering who had sent me the video and why they'd waited until now to share it. My phone rang. It was the hospital. Mom's kidneys were failing. I rushed to the hospital, weaving through traffic and running red lights. Mom lay hooked to machines, her breathing shallow. We need to start dialysis immediately. Dr. Patel explained the damage to her kidneys is severe. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. News vans parked at the neighborhood entrance. The police called twice asking for copies of my water tests and security footage. We found 6 bottles of antifreeze in the Thompsons' garage. Detective Rodriguez told me one had a modified cap with a small tube attachment. Lab tests show it matches the chemical signature in your water samples. When I finally returned home that night, 30 neighbors stood on my lawn with candles. Ted stepped forward, handing me an envelope. "We took up a collection for your mom's medical bills." He said it's not enough, but it's a start. Inside was $1,470 in checks and cash. "We didn't know," whispered Mrs. Gonzalez, who lived 3 doors down. "Karen told everyone your mom was faking her illness for attention." The story spread across local news. Homeowner Association. Horror couple poisoned neighbor's water over garden decorations, ran the headline. 3 more families came forward with mysterious illnesses following disputes with Karen. Malcolm called me from a new number, his voice shaking. "I swear I didn't know what they were doing. Please, you have to believe me. Did you help hide it?" I asked. His silence told me everything. The preliminary hearing was standing room only. Karen and Doug pleaded not guilty, their lawyer arguing the footage was altered and calling me a bitter homeowner with a grudge. Their bail was set at $500,000 each. Malcolm and 2 other board members resigned after text messages showed they had discussed my mother's suspicious illness months ago. The homeowner association office was flooded with outraged calls demanding all board members quit. I received a letter from the district attorney asking if I'd accept a plea deal where Karen and Doug would serve 5 years instead of the possible 20. "No," I replied. "They tried to murder my mother slowly and cruelly. They deserve the maximum." Ted and 5 other neighbors formed a new interim homeowner association board. Their first decision was suspending all fines and violations pending a complete review of the rules. The water company became a hot topic. Lawyers for the homeowner association argued I'd bought it illegally, but my paperwork was solid. I announced new rates, normal for most residents, but a special premium for properties owned by anyone who had served on Karen's board. "This is simply a business decision," explained to reporters. "I calculate risk differently for those who supported poisoners." 4 former board members put their houses up for sale the next day. No one bought them. Meanwhile, Mom began to recover. The dialysis worked, though doctors warned she might need a transplant. Eventually, spent hours researching treatments, nights sleeping in her hospital room. On day 17, I woke to find her watching me. "You look awful," she whispered, smiling weakly. "You should see the other guys," I joked, tears falling down my cheeks. The following week, police discovered a journal in Karen's bedroom detailing every neighbor she targeted over 3 years, 15 families, 3 pets that died mysteriously, 1 elderly man who moved to assisted living after unexplained health problems. The prosecutor added 14 more counts to the charges. Mom came home 63 days after her collapse. The neighbors lined the street clapping as our car pulled up. Ted and his wife had cleaned our house, filled the fridge, and put the garden decorations back in place, now joined by 20 new ones donated by neighbors. "We thought you might want to restore your collection," Ted explained. The following Sunday, the new homeowner association board president, Elaine Jenkins, who had apparently despised Karen for years, knocked on our door with an official document. "The board voted unanimously to exempt your property from all homeowner association regulations permanently," she said, handing me the notarized papers. "And we'd like to name the community garden after your mother if that's okay." Mom cried when I told her. 2 months later, Karen and Doug accepted a plea deal for 12 years each, plus compensation. During impact statements, Mom spoke directly to them. "I forgive you," she said softly, "but I'll never forget I transferred ownership of Clearwater LLC to a community trust run by Ted, Elaine, and 3 other neighbors. The proceeds fund medical expenses for all of Karen's victims." Yesterday, we held the ribbon cutting for the Helen Morrison Healing Garden at the community center. Every family brought a garden figure to place along the pathway. I still keep the security cameras running though. Some lessons you only need to learn once.